committee really come together. And by the end of this meeting, we should be able to have a pretty cogent proposal that will be ready to take back to the mayor and back to the county commissioners and then eventually to the public, and a plan to do so. So let's start with the committee reports. If we could do the fundraising, Tim and Moo, please.
Good morning. We've got a smaller crowd today. Thanks to Bob's help, we've got great news today. We've increased the private giving by $5 million since our last meeting. I think that'll really show the commissioners that we have some horsepower behind this, and we're going to leverage the hell out of it. Scott will be distributing to you a list of prospects on the private side, mostly corporations and businesses. If you could take a look at that list and let us know whether or not you have any influence or can open a door with any of those organizations, we'd be very grateful. More to come.
So we have also made some great progress and are deep into the weeds relative to a lot of the legal and technical issues, and are leaving the political issues to Chip. And we are having an all-day meeting next Tuesday with legal counsel, both from Nixon Peabody. Andrew Potts is coming into town solely for this purpose. And we have spent an extensive amount of time with lawyers from Peck Schaefer who are very familiar with this concept, and we see some light. And we're not done, but we do see a path to getting done. And we'll work with Bob and everybody in terms of how we eventually put that down into a proposal, and whether or not we show two different paths or one path. And clearly, in terms of the levy side, sales tax is lapped property tax several times going around the track, but that's something we need to decide on, I guess, as a task force as to what the best political route would be. So more to come, and if anybody has any specific questions, you know where to find me.
Any questions or comments? We're still in the process of meeting with potential donors. Scott and I met with Duke Energy this morning. We've got some meetings coming up, and also we're meeting with the boards and the what do you call them, Scott? The resident organizations of Music Hall, to make sure we start getting the word out that we'd like to get all the fundraising in so that we can lower that public number that we have when we go to the county commissioners and the mayor. Great. Any questions or comments for Moo or for Tim? Okay. Mabe on outreach and marketing, please.
Can you take this one? Yeah, disconnect it first. Disconnect. Okay, it's already up there.
All right. So last time we met, we said that we wanted to test consumers. Can you hear me? Oh, you need it. I'm sorry. All righty. Last time we met, we said that we wanted to meet with consumers and test, call it the marketing grassroots campaign, the Save Our Icons that we shared with you 2 meetings ago, to make sure that the tone, the message, and the whole concept, how was it engaging people out there? Was it resonating with them? Was it effective? Was it efficient? So here we're going to share several things with you today. One, the outcome of those focus groups. And I do have to say thank you to Elizabeth Pierce, who got them set up, and most importantly to Market Vision, who's a company, a research company out in Blue Ash, who gave us pro bono conducting these sessions, which is about a $20,000 amount. The next thing we did was we plotted all the events that are happening from now till November, and we're talking that in general, we're looking at over 500 events happening in the Cincinnati area, and therefore we created an event criteria. Where should we be at, and how should we present ourselves in those events? So Mary from Lander, who's been leading the campaign, will share with you the outcome of the research, and I will share the events and events criteria.
Great. Does this one work? I'll just do this one. Thanks, Mabe. So as Mabe said, we did conduct research on May 1st and 2nd. We, originally wanted to do more groups, but there's always time and dollar constraints. So we focused on, the most important groups that we felt we needed to qualify this idea with. And that is two African-American groups, both a suburban and an urban, and then two suburban groups, younger with families, 25 to 55, and then older, because we know, this is where the voting is really going to, we really need to win over with suburban folks. So there were the groups and the participants. We wanted to learn a little bit about their perception of the idea of Speak for Us and the Save Our Icons concept, the communication viability, are they getting the message, their interest in and potential support of restoration efforts, and then we also wanted to get a read on the song that we've been developing, which we think is going to be an important part of the grassroots activation. We started, before they had any context, we put together a number of different silhouettes, and with no other context, without talking to them yet about the museum or music hall, we just put these images in front of them. There was 100% recognition of Union Terminal, of what that was, and slightly lower, but still I think very high, 76% recognition among all respondents that this was Music Hall. For some context, these were some other things that we put in, other silhouettes that we put in front of them. So 100%. So the Union Terminal is as recognizable and an iconic, yes, Elizabeth, you should have your hands up in the air, as the Mickey Mouse ears. Interestingly, Fountain Square, only 72%, but it was apparently confused with the Rio Jesus statue. Sydney Opera House, 44%, and yes, Eiffel Tower, only 80%. So I think pretty amazing, and speaks to, I think the right to kind of use these buildings even in silhouette form. So that was fun. We weren't surprised to learn again that people have very positive feelings, association, and memories of both buildings. There was universal agreements to the significance of the buildings to the county and region, and that was a specific question that we asked them. And there was also high agreement that these buildings were significantly to them personally. And some expressed a desire, in particular for Music Hall, to be more personally relevant and approachable, free concerts. It's kind of like, again, Bob, how many research groups have you been? Well, if you just gave me a coupon, if you give me something free, of course I'm interested in your brand or product. So not surprising. And respondents did want and demand competent leadership, of both of these buildings to ensure, and this came later, that any funds that are, given to them are used very wisely. We then shared the buildings with faces on them and, the Speak for Us idea. Again, they're incredibly recognizable icons, but we did find out that the graphic approach was highly telegraphic and effective. The messaging resonated with the respondents, and they associated the word icon with historical significance, and that was interesting. There were a few people that said, I don't know if icon registers with people, what do they think that means? And they went straight to where we want them to go, which is history and the historical treasures. Again, use of the icons in the buildings themselves are engaging. It draws people into the effort without the cynicism that can surround, kind of other political efforts. Speak for Us definitely served as a call to action from the buildings to the public. As soon as they saw it, they said things like, oh, they need our help. They can't speak. They need us to speak for them. They're sad because they're in need of repair and they need our help. I mean, the verbatims were really spot on, which was nice. The respondents did prefer communication that's informational and conveys a sense of urgency but isn't too negative. We had other versions of this that we exposed. You know, one might be "Speak for us, our walls are crumbling," you know, things like that, and they did not like that at all, too negative. So they definitely wanted, you know, the knowledge and awareness of the problems, but overtly negative was a definite turnoff. And again, the faces really humanized the silhouettes. As soon as we showed them with faces, there was, "Oh, look at that," you know, and again, even another layer of communication in terms of the help that they needed. Almost all participants believed that both buildings were worthy of restoration. And it was interesting that once exposed to the magnitude of the capital required to restore the buildings, most participants immediately understood, and some even proposed, the need for public funding in addition to private efforts, which was really interesting. I mean, they volunteered. Oh, that much? Okay, wow, private efforts alone, you know. Yeah, we said do a gala earlier. Clearly, we now understand that's not going to be enough. The public's going to have to be involved. And just as you said before, that sales tax is lapping property tax, again, they volunteered right away. Oh, no, much prefer a sales tax. Makes much more sense. We would definitely, you know, support that. So that has definitely been confirmed again. There was still, though, an overwhelming sense of distrust for local government and leaders and how funds would be handled. And of course, the streetcar and the Bengals sales tax were cited as reasons for distrust. I think another thing that happily happened too, as people started talking about the icons and the historic nature of the buildings, again, volunteered people said, "Yeah, you know, we're doing all this development at the banks and everything else. Have we forgotten about our historic buildings? You know, this is so good. We need to make sure that those aren't left behind." The song. So we did play the song for them, which I'll play a couple verses for you, and found that it is very catchy, has a clear message. You know, they did, and interestingly, again, they volunteered, "Oh, you should share that with the community and encourage people to create their own versions," which again has been, you know, kind of the concept all along. So we'll share, and this song is rough. This is not a professional singer or anything else. We think it's going to play. That would help. Is this the song? Thanks, Scott.
From Union Terminal to Music Hall, no, we're not gonna let them fall. Hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Open your eyes, no voice is too small to keep our building standing tall. Hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey.
So that's just a couple of verses. It's very simple, and it's meant to be simple so that anybody, no matter, you know, your musical ability, can sing along. Simple rhymes that you can remember. So we're working on refining the lyrics now, working in some of our Save Our Icons language, and so on. So again, the song was well received. So do you want to talk about the grassroots activation? Oh, okay. So we are talking about a June 1st activation with the balloons that we've talked about on both buildings. The song ready to release and share with the community. Obviously, collateral development and some ad development tip-ins for, you know, brochures and playbills and things are being developed now. But all of the things that we'll need at the, not that we're going to be at all 500 events, but we're going to be at a lot of them. So what's the collateral that we need there to share and get the message out? So that's in the process. Obviously, the website and social media activation has already begun, but will happen in earnest. And then again, really looking at these events and using them as opportunities to engage with and educate the public. I think there's even a small ballet event at Washington Park next week, next Wednesday, yeah, that we'll be at.
And the other thing is that we're not going to commit to it today, but we're trying to have the helium balloons ready for the fountain startup here at the Union Terminal. We're trying, Elizabeth, I'm saying that. which would make it an event. You know, it's already an event when we turn, you know, the fountain on, and we have families and children, and, you know, it would be great if we could have those balloons. We know it's, you know, less than 10 days away, but, so the agency is really working hard at that. So yes, we gathered about 10 pages worth of events, and for those of you who gave us what events you think we should be participating, thank you. And Brian, really, who works with Missy, really took the task of putting it together, and we said, oh my God, we cannot be in 500 events. You know, money would run out before, you know, our energy would. So we put together a criteria. So the criteria, you have it in front of you. Basically, and events A, or the ones that we will go full blast, we want to have a booth, a presence, a visible presence. We would have the icons, if you remember from the parade. We have customs, so some people wear them with both buildings. Handouts. We talked about, and I have used this previously in my experience in P&G, some kind of roulette where people, you know, they make a line because they want some kind of, you know, giveaway, whether it's a tattoo, you know, anything away, a pin, a lapel, and that allows us for conversation with the people while they're in the line. We also talked about that in events A, we want to capture people's testimony so we can put it in our social media. So really leveraging the historic and the memories that people have with the buildings. We'd also have t-shirts, so everybody dressed in yellow and so forth, and handouts definitely with the key information that we want to hand out. But that is very costly and requires a lot of effort. So what do we do for the balance of the events? So events B would be a team of volunteers with t-shirts and maybe balloons, just basic balloons, which we're making a lot of them, and handouts. Event C would be sort of like imagine a marathon, and there are a lot of 5Ks happening in, you know, in the summer period. We want people wearing t-shirts. So it's just the presence of us in those events. And what we call D is leave behind. So think about, we've done this in the museum before, in a Panera or in a Rotary Club, anywhere where we want posters and handouts, but not necessarily people. So the criteria that we used was, or we're using, is the location of the event, if it draws a suburban crowd, the size of the event, and the relevance for each of the two buildings. So with that criteria, we're narrowing down the 500 events. So for example, right now we have determined that there are, I don't know, 100 events happening in Covington. Well, we're not going to be in those. We really need to narrow down to an area where we want to be. So what happens next? We're not going to share the calendar. We have it. It's many pages long. We won't bore you with that. What we have realized is that we need an event coordinator. The actual being present in all of those events, we need somebody who's there. How many volunteers? We're in contact with the volunteers from the World Choir Games, the volunteers that helped in the streetcar. But just getting everybody together and coordinating that, it's a really massive effort. And we saw that recently. There's an event, as Mary said, next week at Music Hall. And they told us, listen, we're running the event. We don't have volunteers on top to wear the costumes. So, and we know that we have to make this happen, and we need the help. So that is something that we have to get on as soon as possible. And then, based on the feedback that we got from the focus groups, we're adapting and, you know, the campaign and the feedback that we got from consumers, but we are ready to go and moving forward. Questions?
No, I'll only add that 22 of us are going to sacrifice our dignity and pass off lunch in the ground.
Thank you.
You haven't even seen them yet. So generous.
Yes, thank you so much.
You've done a lot for this group, Tim, but that's really above and beyond the call.
One point I wanted to add too about the icon recognition, the silhouette for Music Hall was only 76% recognizable. As soon as you put the photograph of Music Hall in it, it was 100%. And remember, that's always how we're going to start introducing, is with photography first. So I think we'll have to make that point.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Great work.
Thank you.
Ravi. So, Wick, do you have anything that you want to add on the engineering portion?
Our work will begin when we hire the design.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We've done all the previous work.
Yeah, we're ready to go. What I want to do now is have Doug and Scott and I, and then Chip will follow us, take you through a proposal. We've put together kind of a straw man presentation, and we'd like to share that with you and get your comments this time. This is a presentation that we piloted this morning with Duke Energy, and that we're going to use with the resident organizations of Music Hall. But we want to make sure that we get your comments and make sure it's good. So we'll share it with you. If you have comments as we go through each page, please just shout them out so that we can take advantage of them. This also would be a canned presentation that you would be able to use with any groups that you were talking to as well. So this is just an outline of the presentation. We're trying to keep it as short as possible, but we're also trying to keep it on target. I've asked Scott if we could put in the repair and construction the annual degradation costs, which I think will surprise everyone when they see the total number. It's probably around $10 million. We need to figure out what it is for Music Hall, but we'll put that in. Is there anything anybody else sees that they'd like to have on this page? I'll just keep going. If you have comments, please share them. We talk about the formation of the task force, the creation of the task force, what the charge was for the task force. We list the task force members. Then we talk about the evaluation process and who was involved. And we actually give numbers for what we think the budgets are or need to be. We also talked about the alternatives that we looked at for Museum Center. We thought that was important. We didn't list the costs. We didn't think that was necessary, but we can get into that detail if someone asks. We talked about the fundraising committees, subcommittees, and the work. At this point, I want to just, I know Scott doesn't want me to do this, but I want to call out Scott Farmer because it was the Farmer Foundation that pledged $5 million this week. And Scott, your leadership is really appreciated, and your graciousness in taking us forward. We're going to use that as we've used the other commitments we've gotten to leverage getting other commitments from corporations and private sources within the community. We used it this morning with Duke Energy. We weren't bashful in doing that. So thank you, Scott. I thought it was important I said that before I put this slide up.
And I might just give a little explanation of some of the line items there. Prior to the task force, there were many commitments towards the Music Hall portion of the project. And I think this process really allowed us to kind of solidify the support of the Music Hall Revitalization Board, which had pledged dollars towards Music Hall. So that second line item includes a broad group of some really significant givers that totals $8 million towards Music Hall, as well as the additional commitments, the Procter & Gamble $5 million, the Farmer Foundation for $5 million, and then Otto, thank you for your leadership in this as well, Fifth Third Bank and Macy's. The next, so in looking at that, we've put together what we think is a reasonable target of $40 million.
Yeah, we'll keep adding to this list to get to the 40 million. Hopefully we'll hear from Kroger soon and Duke Energy soon as two of those. Then we talk about the options we looked at, and we thought it was appropriate at this moment in time to put a stake in the ground and say that we recommend the sales tax because of the interest expense savings, the lower length of term, and the fact that it would be paid for in part by people outside the county. That was a big issue, wasn't it, Chip, when we talked to the county commissioners and the mayor? However, we recognize the baggage that Mabe and Mary pointed out in their presentation, the focus groups, that we're going to have to deal with the stadium issue and the other issue you mentioned. Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So this is the basically the debits and credits balance sheet at the end that says basically we need 323 million, and we have a plan to get 323 million, which means the sales tax levy would have to be about 198 million. We think it's important we keep that cosmetically below 200 million. Obviously, we're going to work to get it as low as we possibly can between now and the time it's actually finalized. Yes? Wick?
The numbers of 110 million, 184, at one point, we finished our work for 100 million, 180. So what's the, I'd like to be sure that we're all using the same number.
Absolutely, absolutely. The 110 was basically the number Steve used last meeting, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. And I think that one, Wick, is after Steve has done his work. I think the earlier number was before they had done their work. That was the January meeting we had, the January 20th meeting, I think it was. The 184 is, well, you want to explain the context? We actually have a detailed accounting of that number, but it's all in, basically.
The 184 assumed the early design, early start, which was a $4.4 million savings. And because that was basically start design in May, and we're not going to be starting design in May, so we lost that credit savings that we had in our projection.
Yeah, these are the
Yeah,
numbers.
I mean, and those numbers, I mean, those numbers are all the ones that come right out of the Langdon report. We can go right to that, and all that details there. So there's no changing numbers or trying to on the construction costs.
As you pointed out, though, Wick, I would qualify these numbers saying these are the numbers before design drawings, right? Because, you know, as yeah, that's what you've pointed out to us all along the way. Obviously, we have a lot of work. You can see the importance of the tax credits here, which Moo has talked about earlier. And this is a lot of work that needs to be done to get this $55 million, but you can see the importance of it. It's a big number, but it's a very, very important number. And obviously, if we can get the private giving up, that would reduce the pressure on the other items as well. So this is the next steps in the timeline. Let's make sure this is complete. I'm wondering if we shouldn't put a slide or two in on the public campaign that Mabe just described. That would be one slide. And maybe on that same slide, put in some of the early survey work that we've done or research work that we've done that shows that there's public support for this. Because I think it's important to have that here. We could quote the CBC report as one, and we could quote some of the research that Mabe's done.
I thought the icons thing, frankly, was actually pretty testimonial to both organizations in terms of public awareness and
Yeah,
value.
yeah. But we actually have done a survey that said they'll vote for it, so, yeah. Anything that we're missing here on this slide? Well, it would be my point of view, and I would like a discussion about this because it might be a wrong point of view because I'm a neophyte at this, is that we should set a date when we have a public announcement and we get all of the people who have committed large donations together to give them credit, And I think we've already talked to the Inquirer. They're willing to run a whole section on this. And on that date, we make a public announcement that we've got this, we've got a plan, and we're just waiting for the politicians to do their job. I wouldn't say it that way. That's kind of a pejorative way of saying it, but that's what I would say. And, but I think we have to get to the politicians first before we do that and give them an opportunity to tell us they're in which case this could be a mutual celebration of everyone, or they're out, in which case this would be a hammering of them. That's the way I see it, Tim, but Chip is better equipped to make these judgments than I am. But I think that date is fast approaching, and that's why we're sharing this presentation now.
And that's in the June number, which is like, I think, first week, second week of June.
And then we want to thank everybody. Any questions, comments, or on this presentation, given the caveats we've talked about? Is everybody okay with it? Yes, please. Yes? Okay. Yes. Okay. I think that's a good idea. I think any numbers we can put in to make our case is a good idea. It gives us credibility if we put the numbers in. Good idea. Yes, Otto?
Well, I'll let Chip discuss the overarching issue there. I don't think it's small. Okay, Joe, I'll talk to him directly. I'll let Chip address part of that. But I think, I mean, here's the reality is, it's going to be 6 years from when you start until the Union Terminal project is done. And during that time period, a number of the earned revenue streams that we generate here are actually going to be diminished during that time period. And so if you diminish the earned revenue streams and you take away $3 million a year out of the operating budget, the construction costs by Turner and Messer don't include the utility costs and all the expenses of operating the building. They did not include those numbers. So Museum Center would be in a situation of not using the building, or maybe using it partially, and still paying all the expenses of the occupancy of the building during a time period that the revenues from the building are actually diminished significantly. And it's just an absolute financial, puts the institution in absolute peril. I mean, there's no way of looking at it. And I think in line with the research findings, we certainly don't want to be threatening in terms of how we say that to anybody, but I think that's the reality. And I know that I want Chip to address this. I don't think this is a surprise to commissioners. What the commissioners have said, I think I'll just let Chip explain what his conversation has been with the commissioners relative to this.
And you know, I'm not going to turn to John Silverman necessarily, but he was there during the TLRC process, and the Tax Levy Review Committee, when it made its recommendations to the commissioners, said that the TLRC, would not recommend an operating levy until the capital issues were resolved or on their way to being resolved. And that's what caused this to begin in the first place. So we have done everything that has been asked of us my conversations with the commissioners has been, the reality is that the Cincinnati Museum Center faces a $3.3 million a year shortfall in its budget, and there's no discussion about filling that. We've got a transitional period when this, as Doug pointed out, during the construction, where revenues will be down, and due to operations, and then if you take this $3.3 million off the table as well, you create a dire situation. And so the conversation around sales tax is, well, let me back up. The construction process will alleviate some of the expenses, and we've not been able to estimate that yet, at least as far as I know. But let's say that $1 million can be alleviated. That still leaves us a $2.3 million hole for argument purposes. And the property tax, if we were to put a property tax on the ballot to cover the expenses of the rehabilitation, that does not give us the flexibility to do then operations. The sales tax provides us that flexibility. And when I talked to one of the commissioners a couple weeks ago, I pointed this out to him that don't forget we have this operating issue, and the sales tax gives us the flexibility to do that. And I think it's only fair that during this transitional time, we have a discussion around the operating costs being taken care of as well until the museum center gets fully operational again. And then we can talk about ongoing operating expenses, whether it's a property tax or a sales tax. So I think it's absolutely fair, Otto, to bring that point up. I don't think the issue is completely resolved in everybody's mind yet. But I think it's a fact that we have to address with, with everybody that we discuss this with, because it's like, why would you add and put an addition on your home if you can't cover your mortgage costs? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So, more to come on that, but it's got to be part of the discussion. So.
Right.
Well, and we've talked about the need, and I believe this sincerely, that we need to show how expenses will come down because of the rehabilitation, and in any way we can increase revenues to offset that. And I think it's a fair conversation to have. But again, I think that during this construction, revenues will be down. And I think it's patently unfair to eliminate an operating levy when you know expenses are going or revenues are going to be down, and expect the tenant to handle those costs in a way that isn't draconian.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be the issue, Chip. I think the issue will be exactly what John said, which is at the end of the 6-year construction period, can we raise revenue enough using the new space we've opened up by moving the HVAC systems, putting in science exhibits? Can we reduce our operating costs through the capital improvement? I mean, that's the commitment that the commissioners will undoubtedly ask us to make. And I know it's a hard one, but it's one we got to figure out, because they're not going to want to get through this and then say, okay, well, let's put another operating levy to the voters. That's just not going to be politically palatable.
Right. Well, as he did to me a few minutes ago, I will hand this question over to Doug.
Well, I mean, it's just something we got to deal with.
I agree.
There's no, I mean,
I understand the politics of it and the situation. What we have to do is get through the first 6 years. And you've got 6 years to figure that out and
Yeah.
get it worked through. And I think that's what we've done, is we've risen to the challenges there. I think key to being able to increase the earned revenue substantially will be the capacity to come back after this project's underway and start looking at a science center type of development, which we know will increase the attendance about 350,000. It's the highest earned revenue genre of museums that's out there, and I think it puts new experiences in place. But I think it's one step at a time. You know, there's people who want us to jump to the Science Center fast or other exhibits. I say, you know what? You can't do any of that till you know the building's secured and dealt with. And when that's known in the community and we got those things in place, then we'll start working on the next thing. So we got 6 years to get there.
Yeah, I think how we talk about this, though, is going to be really important. Moo?
As a sequitur to that, do we need to have a line item for the relocation costs of the residents of Music Hall to Harry pursue them? They're obviously going to endure some reduction in revenue and some increased expenses as well. And I can imagine some of those companies saying, hey, what about me?
Yeah.
I would just say there's a point difference, which is that we're replacing revenues that we're currently receiving. Not, you know, and so I think I think that is a point of fact difference. And my understanding is that they're not moving out of the building.
No,
The
but
offices aren't moving out.
Their
but
subscription and single ticket sales will be down.
Right.
Because there'll be an alternate.
And Moo, our revenues will be down too. So keeping that money in place doesn't replace the anticipated loss of revenue that we will in this institution during that time period. So there are things we will have to do to offset other revenue losses similar to all the music hall companies. It's just like trying to find ways to cover all those operating losses as well as $3 million a year. That creates an institution that is financially at risk.
John? Yeah, it's a great question.
And that was a $2.6 million number, and it's still in here. So there was unidentified potential additional reductions of 2.6 million on the internal project, and it's still still contained here.
My experience is you got to come up with a number, and we put some degree of tolerance in there. But what that number will require, assuming we deliver that number, we get the voters to agree to that number, is during the design phase, there'll be puts and calls that the resident organizations will have to make around scope in order to deliver that number. But, yeah.
So once you have the budget, you begin working toward that budget, and sometimes you have to eliminate some of the plans.
Yeah. But that's typical. I mean, in all the plants and buildings I built, I don't know any other way to do it. Do you? That's the way you do it. Yeah. Well, I think that part we feel good about. I think the Langen and GBBN have told me that they feel like they've discovered all the surprises, that there won't be any surprises. And phase one was part of that discovery process. I'm not too worried about that part. What I worry more about is as we get into the design phase, the trade-offs between design choices and potential changes in scope that would need to be made. But that's typical, and I don't know any other way to get around it unless we went to design phase now and spent the $4.5 million that would cost. But if we're not ready to do that, because we'd be spending all that money with potentially no political way forward and making lots of choices. Yes, please, Ken. Agree.
That's why Bernadette's one of the best political operatives in the city. And
She knows how to do it.
she's run a lot of political campaigns, a lot of political issues, and she knows the community.
I think you're absolutely right, Bernadette. We've got to figure out how to do that. I mean, part of what we're trying to do now is I'm trying to get to the boards of these organizations. We're meeting with the resident boards of the music hall in a few weeks to begin spreading that information out. But arguably, that's from the boards of the organizations down. And what you're describing is we need to work up. And I agree with that. Right. Right. Agreed. That's why we need the project manager, I guess, right, Mabe? Yes, ma'am.
One of the questions that has particularly come up in our work on our committee is under a sales tax scenario, we have to run cash flow numbers in terms of what the actual costs will be as we go on.
Yeah.
However, the plan would be to have a bond issue
Right.
that would front load the monies. And to do a bond issue, we're going to need debt service coverage and the money at 1.5 times. So the question is, what happens at the end after everything's been paid to that half? Substantial amount of money. And one of the things that everybody who's been involved with is you're going to have to say what you're going to do with the excess monies at the end. And I think it goes a little bit to the political issue of leadership questions.
Yeah.
Questions of commissioners and a little distrust in that world. And one of the things that people have put forward is we need something that is sort of above reproach. It's been suggested maybe endowment is one of them potentially, so we don't have to come back in
Right.
10 or 30 years. But I think it's a question that we need to address up front before we can ask.
I would say that in the focus groups, a couple things that were really clear, and one was they wanted to be an absolute definite purpose for the funds with no arbitrariness at all in terms of where any of that money went. And it was really critical in the focus groups. And we've seen that in other polling and other work we've done before. The voters don't want to think there's any arbitrary nature about the use of the funds when they put them out there. So I think you're right. That really does need to be really clear. And if they think that at the end there's some slush fund, that will probably negatively impact the entire proposal.
Other comments, questions? Chip?
I would like to say that the thanks were up there, and we listed everybody. And if we'd put Bob's name on that, he would have rejected
No, I don't want my
the
name up
proposal.
there.
So when he agreed to do this last fall, one of the things he said, "Well, I won't have to do any fundraising, will I?" And we said, "Oh no, of course not. You know, it's about getting the proposal and getting it together." As we've gone,
I'm
through the
not a
pro-
fundraiser, and I don't like doing it.
Yeah, he's not a fundraiser. You saw the numbers, right? As we've gone through the process, he has stepped up to do whatever's necessary in this thing, and he's been a great fundraiser.
Thank you, Doug. Just next steps. We went through this before, but in terms of, I'll start with the conduct a Hamilton County likely voter poll. We have a meeting on the 19th with Gary Lindgren and the CBC, who conducted the poll in December of 2012. To go over, we'll use the bulk of that poll, and as the base for this one, we will update it, and we should have finalized the polling questions probably by the end of next week or early the following week. So On Monday, we'll talk to the pollster as well about timing. So I would suspect yet in May, we're going to be conducting this poll. Just so you know, they usually run for 2 or 3 nights, and we can get information back very quickly, but I would suspect a week or so after the poll is done, we will have the entire, all of the data necessary in order to start making some decisions. Just some of the things we'll ask: sales versus property tax, obviously, timing, just some of the basic questions, likelihood of voting. So I feel pretty confident that the results will be largely the same. We'll test more deeply both funding for both facilities, funding, since it looks as though we're moving towards a sales tax. We'll test that issue more than we have in the past, so that we can have good data when we move into the political campaign. Meet with the county commissioners and the mayor and the city manager. We have met with the city manager and the finance director. I have met with the mayor's office as well about the $10 million commitment that we're seeking. As you know, the city has committed $10 million for Union, had committed $10 million for Union Terminal. We confirmed that commitment, for Music Hall, had committed $10 million. We've confirmed that that commitment is still in place, and they intend to honor it. We've asked them for an additional $10 million to bring the city's commitment to $20 million. These are, after all, their buildings. And in our meeting with city staff, as well as I did a follow-up meeting with the mayor's chief of staff, suggested that asking the commissioners to put a levy on the ballot was a significant ask. And we were asking them really to help solve an issue that is the city's responsibility. And then, in our opinion, an additional $10 million commitment from the city, in the aggregate $20 million for both facilities, was necessary in order to meet the commissioners' desires to have city skin in the game, was their term that they used with Bob and me. So we have found a funding source that has been in place for many years that we hope to repurpose. Obviously, there are political considerations to be dealt with, as we've shared before. The issue of double taxation has come up in previous conversations, and we need to work through those, but we have a plan, hopefully, to convince the mayor and city council to repurpose this funding stream to build a pool of money in the total of $10 million to bring the city's commitment up to $20 million. Public announcement of the entire process. We talked a few minutes ago about the media. Elizabeth and I were speaking earlier. And I think that team is in the process of putting into place a comprehensive conversation with the Cincinnati Enquirer and perhaps others to be coincidental with the public rollout. Obviously, as Bob pointed out a few minutes ago, it is necessary that we meet with the mayor and the 3 county commissioners, perhaps every member of council, to talk through this proposal before it be made public. I would argue also that before icons start floating above buildings, we need to have conversations with them to prepare them for what is the beginning of this grassroots campaign. We had a presentation a few minutes ago about Save Our Icons. One of the issues, and we've had significant conversation about this, we have a grassroots effort that is focusing on saving 2 iconic structures. At some point, we will transition into a political campaign where we're asking people to vote yes on issue fill in the blank. And in order to make sure that we don't violate any campaign finance laws, I have spoken with Jill Meyer, who is the managing partner of Frost Brown Todd, to provide us some guidance in terms of making sure that we don't commingle grassroots funds with campaign funds that require a different level of reporting and have a different level of review by governmental entities. I mean, the grassroots effort is just, we can do essentially whatever we want within the bounds of decency, obviously, but there's no oversight by the Elections Commission, Board of Elections, or anything like that. So we'll be meeting with Jill to make sure that she understands what we have in mind and that we can get guidance so that we don't create any problems for ourselves or anybody else. The public presentations to the county commissioners, we're going to hand you 2 documents that show the timeline. Essentially, the timeline hasn't changed significantly. The CMC capital report is due. I guess that's the combined capital report would be my guess. Doug, isn't that what? It's what we're...
It's technically the CMC capital report,
Right.
and because that's what so that's the response to the tax review committee. Because in their letter,
Right.
they had July 18th was when that report was due.
Right.
And so I think that whenever this is presented, as long as we present before July 18th, I don't think it means there's a meeting on July 18th, at the deadline. I think if we present this beforehand, then that's checked off the list. John wrote the letter that had the date on it, so I think if you ask John if that meets the...
I would
opinion of
suspect...
the author, I think we could check that box.
I mean, obviously, you're expecting a response from the Cincinnati Museum Center, but the TLRC is going to expect the larger proposal eventually as well, so. Right. Yeah, I think it's a little different than typical tax layer review committee. But really in July is when we're in the public domain having discussions about this. We have public hearings that the commissioners have put into place for July 22nd and 23rd, and then another one on July 30th, I believe. We need a draft resolution to the Board of County Commissioners by August 1st, and they vote on August 6th whether to put something on the ballot. So what we're coming to a point whereby the end of May, we hope to have the data from our poll. Moo talked about the meeting next Tuesday with lawyers to hopefully finalize or begin to finalize the ownership issue with respect to tax credits. The private philanthropy continues to move along. We're at 31 million towards a minimum $40 million goal, right, Scott? And so everything is coming together. We will have the grassroots campaign up and running, and there'll be a lot of discussion around this and working towards the August 6th deadline. I have spoken with Brad Ruey, who's a partner at Dinsmore and Scholl, to make sure that we have all of the important dates for sales tax, because it is slightly different than a property tax in terms of qualifying for the ballot, as well as the timing on the timing on the revenues coming in from a sales tax versus a property tax. So he told me that, Doug, that information will be coming to me today on the sales tax, all the sales tax information. We have met with a political campaign team. We expect a proposal probably today to join the team in the initial process so that there is continuity between not only the grassroots effort and the ultimate political campaign, but also just the work that's going on within the task force, so that the political team understands everything that's going on and will go on between now and election day. So I think we've got every piece is in place and moving in the right direction. Ann, is there anything else that I've forgotten?
Any question? I think the challenge is we got to synchronize all this. I'm sorry.
I assume that the city's commitment is going to be spread, maybe spread over.
Well, what we've identified, there's a funding stream that's been in the city's budget for years and years, and it comes here. Part of it comes to Union Terminal, and part of it comes to Music Hall. And one would argue that after these rehabilitation projects are done, that money is likely not necessary. So what we've talked about is repurposing that money to the city's commitment. It doesn't change their annual allocation out the door anyway. Let's repurpose that, make a $10 million commitment, and that will bring their, as I said, bring their total commitment up to $20 million. So the mayor didn't want us to touch the annual capital budget that they use for different things every year. We honored that request. We now need to convince them that this is the right way to go. We're not there yet, but we have plans to have conversations, and we're hopeful that they'll make that additional $10 million application.
The other point you were getting at is when we've talked to donors, we've said that the donation can be spread out over time. And we've done the work, Doug and Steve Kennett at GBBN, to understand what the cash flow needs would be of the construction so that we can match up the donation revenue cash flow with the expense cash flow. And so far, we look to be in pretty good shape.
And just getting back to the sales tax, I mean, that cash flows much more quickly than does a property tax. And in my opinion, it allows us to present a more fiscally conservative argument with respect to public funding for this. I mean, if you believe that public funding makes sense, you have to get past that threshold, but this gets it financed much more quickly and much less expensively for the taxpayers. Anything else? Otto, you usually have a zinger for me. Nothing today. You'll save it for me, right? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? That really concludes our monthly update. I'd like to schedule the next monthly meeting for Tuesday, June 24th. I think 9:30 to 11 or so would be a good time frame. Obviously, there'll be lots of meetings between now and then. I'll send a note out notifying everyone. There'll be lots of meetings between now and then and lots of activity. And those of you on the executive committee, if you'd like to stick around for a short time afterwards, we'll just make sure we've got the next steps figured out. Thank you very much for everybody's contribution to this effort. It's great to see we're going to be going public soon and really trying to get something done. Thank you.